Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our very first webinar that we are doing with Nexa, who are one of our amazing education sponsors, and you're going to learn a lot more about them over the coming months. But today we're going to have a bonfire chat with Shanice, who is the head of ecosystem and business development. And we're going to be having just a fireside chat to really kind of understanding Nexa's mission to real world adoption. But before we jump into our fireside chat, I'm just going to do a few introductions and talk about some upcoming events, and then we will jump into the conversation. So, quick little disclaimer. This is for education purposes only. We're not recommending that you do any type of investments. We always recommend that you reach out to either a financial advisor and definitely do your own research. It's super, super important. I actually have a webinar coming up. I think it's on the 25th that's talking about how do you do your own research and understand a project. So super, super important. And all of this content is recorded. So please be aware of that. So, who am I? If you haven't had a chance to meet me, my name is Danielle Marie. I'm the founder of Evolve Her, which is an education and mentorship platform. Our education platform is open to absolutely everyone. I'm very passionate about education. Our mentorship program is designed specifically for women to bring more women into the Web3 ecosystem. I do a lot of other things. I run a lot of events globally. I'm a part of ODECA, which is the women's working group for the Digital Economy Council of Australia. I've been a blockchain educator for over 5 years, and for the last few years, oh, I just noticed a typo. 2024, 23, 24, and 25, I took home some awards for all of my accomplishments within the ecosystem. So we have some upcoming webinars, Webinar Wednesdays. We're doing this every single Wednesday. Next week, we are speaking with ethical finance. We've got Digital Surge on the 25th. That's where we're going to dive into understanding how you can do your own research. And then the next one that we're having with Nexa, we're going to be diving a lot deeper. So today's a bit of a casual fireside chat, really kind of getting to understand the Nexa ecosystem. But then we will be jumping into the heart of Nexa's architecture, rethinking proof of work. For those of you that don't understand what proof of work is, that's okay. I'm going to cover that in next month's webinar. But we're going to be bringing in Andrew Clifford, who is the president of the Bitcoin Unlimited, and he's going to be diving deep so that you can understand the current limitations of proof of work and how Nexa's architecture is solving some of those problems. So please join us next month to dive deeper. So as I mentioned, we're building out the Education Hub. We currently already have 3 short courses in there. With Nexa particularly, we're actually building out a developer learning track for all of you aspiring developers or already a developer and you kind of want to learn a new skill. There's going to be a course in there for you. So we also share all of the recordings to all of the webinars inside of there. So if you haven't already signed up, I highly recommend. It's 100% free. Our mission is always free, and it's powered by our amazing sponsors, including Nexa. So more content to be added there as we develop over time. We've recently launched a community hub group. We chose WhatsApp. This is where we just we also share the recordings in there. We share upcoming events as an opportunity for you to connect. We're in the very early stages of building this online community, but we really encourage everybody to join and then join the groups that apply to you. We have different chapters in different regions that we're building out. And most importantly, these global events. So that is everything for me. Those are the updates on the events that we have coming in. Now I want to jump into the heart of the conversation. I'm going to bring in Shanice, who I've actually known for a while, and it's been absolutely amazing to see her go from actually one of my previous blockchain students to now the head of ecosystem and business development for Nexa. So, Shanice, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about your story.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here to represent Nexa and talk about what we're building and just catch up with other people in the industry. And of course, we're doing quite a bit together this year with the ecosystem as well. So thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Well, I am excited to jump into this conversation. And one of the things that I actually was just having this conversation the other day with someone before we jump into my first question for you is you really notice the bear market and who's still showing up.
Hmm.
That was actually the common theme. If we hosted our International Women's Day event on Friday, and it was really funny because it wasn't planned, but every single one of the female it became like the slogan, like just show up. So even in the bear market, even if there's only going to be 10 or 15 people that are going to turn up to your events, it's about showing up and it's about being consistent. So I love that, Nexa is not one of those projects that's kind of going away during the bear market and then only coming back. I know that you guys are still building and powering through. So we're going to jump into some of that. But before we kind of jump into all of that, I want to start off with anyone who's kind of new to the Nexa ecosystem. Can you give us a brief overview of yourself and your role with Nexa? And then what is Nexa's overall mission and what are you kind of trying to achieve just on a high level? Because then we'll unpack that as we go through today's conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, for those who don't know, my name is Shanice. My name online and in the community chats is Check. And my role is with ecosystem and business development and B2B for Nexa. And so what that means is I work quite closely with our developer team and also a number of the developers in our ecosystem and creators and builders who are looking to build out a use case or a project on our network or as part of our community. That also means obviously looking for partnership opportunities in the industry and, a lot of operational sort of infrastructure as well, and really working just closely with our development team to deliver and put in place the framework that's needed to put Nexa in front of as many people as we possibly can. So we've had a busy year. Nexa, for those who don't know much about us, we're being developed by the Bitcoin Unlimited organization. We actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year. So Bitcoin Unlimited, really the OGs in the space. They're legacy innovators, and the organization has been here now, really championing scaling in the industry for a number of years and spearheading a lot of really innovative developments. And now we're working on Nexa, and Nexa is a UTXO layer one, and we'll, be able to talk a little bit more about the specifics. And Danielle is going to be doing some educational courses and modules on what that means and how does that fit in the landscape against other blockchains. And but basically, what you need to know about us is that we're here for the long run. Our team definitely are developing and working very hard. Even through the difficult market conditions, it has been a very tumultuous year, and the market's been very volatile and unpredictable for a lot of projects and just for the space in general. And so that hasn't deterred us. We're still here, we're still building. We had a quite a big conference schedule last year. We really put Nexa in front of as many people as we can, and we have a team that's distributed globally, working around the clock basically to deliver the best that we can. We have a upcoming hard fork as well. And yeah, there's a lot planned. We recently released our development roadmap too. So no, we've got a great team and yeah, there's a lot happening. So we encourage people, if you want to learn more about our network and our community, to find us on social media and in our community channels and connect with the team and learn a bit more about what we're doing. But
Yeah, that's definitely one of the key things that we talk about in do your own research is one, understanding the team. The fact that
mhm,
Bitcoin Unlimited has been around for 10 years, it's always like looking who's in behind the projects and then where were they before that, and what
mhm.
have they already kind of accomplished. So I think that's very, very, very important for people to understand. But that's for the future webinar. But when people
Yeah.
hear real world adoption. Like this is a very common narrative that we hear, and that can kind of mean a lot of different things. But what does real world adoption actually look like for Nexa?
Yeah, so I mean, last year I think a good place to look for people that are discovering is we released a media release with Bitcoin.com and we outlined the verticals that we really want to play in. Nexa as a network is primed for token scalability using the UTXO architecture, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the UTXO architecture and the features that are inbuilt in Nexa's network really positions us strongly for use cases such as provenance tracking for supply chain or in-game token economies. So for us, real-world adoption looks like people using our network, using Nexa, and having a really strong ecosystem and community as well is really important for that metric and that goal of achieving real world adoption. So yeah, we've been quite clear about the places that we want to position Nexa in the market. And we recently, I mentioned before, released our development roadmap, and you'd be able to see that for anyone that looks at our forum recently or our X feed as well, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And the development roadmap really outlines a number of applications and projects that are being released this year as well, and the team is actively working on. And all of those are really geared towards positioning Nexa for real world adoption. I think it's also really important to understand in this space, and a lot of people look for this, they look for that one major event that causes a project to skyrocket, and suddenly, that's all we needed was just one major event. But it's not one major event that we're looking for. We're not looking for hype. We're not looking to capitalize on any particular trends. What we do want to be here is for the long run. We're thinking in years and in decades, not just in months or in weeks and what's trending now in the feed. So our team, the things that are being built right now, we see as critical infrastructure for the long run. And we see this as a really important roadmap. It's important to take steps towards that long-term goal of adoption rather than just, oh, we see a trending narrative, let's quickly go and develop something for that one particular narrative that may pass in 3 months time from now. The crypto markets are 24/7, they move very quickly, and I think that one of the reasons that Bitcoin Unlimited has been here for so long, and has had success in that way in the industry is because they've always really focused on the core mission of how do we get blockchain to scale, and what is the best technical approach to achieving that, and how do we put in the best features and the best protocol and the best upgrades that we can to achieve these goals, rather than moving so quickly with what the markets are doing, because we do see a lot of projects do that in the space. It's easy to get caught up in what's happening and in the news cycles. But no, our team are here for the long run, and that goal of real world adoption doesn't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day, so we
Yeah.
definitely take a long-term approach.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And like I had a million thoughts that went through my head, but I remember when I very first got into the industry, there was all of this, and you talked about provenance. And I remember VET, which was VeChain. I don't even know if they're still around, but like
Yeah,
back
they are.
then,
Yeah.
right? There was a lot of hype around VeChain, and it's the Providence chain. And it felt like there was all these siloed chains. It was like this chain is for Providence, this chain is for AI, this chain is. And it's like, okay, well, like, it'd be kind of like going to a bar that only serves beer and then only serves
Yeah.
wine and then only serves spirits. It's like, no, we need, a chain that can kind of have all of these real world adoption, but
Mhm.
also solve some of the issues, which we'll unpack a little bit today. And then we'll dive a lot deeper in next month's webinar with Andrew when we talk about how you guys have basically kind of reinvented proof of work, because it is the best consensus mechanism. But for those of you that are maybe new to this industry, and you're either on this call or watching this recording, it has scalability issues, and that is one of I believe one of the core things that Nexa is solving. So we will continue to unpack that. I think you've already answered my next question. So we will jump into you talk about building communities because community is really really important. For a while there, there was like the NFT communities, like your Bored Apes, and then there was like the meme coins, and I think from a lot of people looking on the outside in, they just thought they're like, oh, who are these NFTs? Like, why are people buying these pictures of apes or these dogs with hats? But really underneath it was about the community, that it was their way of trying to kind of build a community. So community is definitely very, very important. So from your idea, building communities, what do you kind of think is the best way to kind of get people to feel like they are a part of a community rather
Mhm.
than buying an NFT or, a meme token?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first point, I have 3 points I'd cover for this particular question. The first one being that you need to establish a product market fit and your value proposition before you put anything in the market, and understand where you play and who you're building for. And I think that NFTs have their place, that idea of tokenizing anything, whether it's real world assets or as collectibles. That is a very relevant use case and definitely something we have in our ecosystem. But what we did see through that NFT bull run, and that was around the time that I came into the industry now 5, 6 years ago, is a lot of projects at that time came out with these really flashy roadmaps and these grand ideas of how they were going to change the world with NFTs. And there were a lot of fundamentals missing from those roadmaps and from the operational infrastructure that's really required to scale any kind of project, not just in crypto, but in tech, in SaaS, and also just in every industry, whether it's e-commerce, retail, whatever it might be. So that infrastructure and the long-term vision is really critical for any project. So I would say when you talk about building communities, and we talk about this not just from the perspective of what we are looking to achieve with Nexa, but also how I talk with our ecosystem developers as well, people that are in our ecosystem and building projects, is firstly, yes, you've got to think about your product market fit and who are you building for and what is your value proposition and what sets your project or your idea apart, whether you're building on Nexa or you're part of our team with Bitcoin Unlimited, and we're looking at different applications or use cases that we can explore and build for real world adoption. You've got to think about how does it fit in the market, and establish that before you take anything to market. You need to really deeply understand your ICP, which is your integrated customer profile. You need to really understand who they are and who are you building for and who are you speaking to with your application. So that's the first point that I would cover for building a lasting community. And secondly, you've got to listen to your users. You've got to communicate with your community. You've got to take feedback. You've got to understand exactly what they're looking for. What are their pain points? What is the friction that they're experiencing on an everyday basis? I think this is still a barrier generally for crypto as an industry, that we've still got to solve that friction in onboarding and in daily usage, but we're starting to see a breakthrough now with various use cases and applications. And right now we're seeing, obviously quite a lot of adoption where stablecoins are involved and neobanks and prediction markets. So there are certain verticals that are really finding product market fit on a global scale. And this is where I really believe Nexa is positioned strongly, because Nexa is primed for token scalability. And, we have a very global goal in mind for our network and for where it can be placed in, enterprise and institutions especially. So yeah, you've got to listen to your users and take feedback and hear from your community, and keep that in mind when you're developing any product or any application, is using surveys and feedback cycles to make sure that what you're building is intuitive and is really speaking to what the demand in the market actually is as well. And thirdly, I would say that your narrative is extremely important. And in my first answer, I referenced the Bitcoin.com media release. We do have other media releases out as well, but the reason that one was quite pivotal for us last year is we really came out and said, okay, well, these are the verticals that, we're looking to really exist in and play in and own as a network and as an organization. And having a strong narrative is really important, not only for connecting with your ideal community and your audience, but also positioning in a B2B sense as well. So, yeah, definitely narrative is really important. We see this a lot, the word narrative as a hype term, especially on X or crypto Twitter. A lot of people talk about narrative, but really what we're talking about is your brand positioning when we say that. And what is the messaging that you're trying to put out in the world? And who are you connecting with when you market and when you promote your product and when you position yourself on the timeline? So, definitely, I'd say those are the three places you need to begin when we look at building lasting communities. Just to recap, one, you really got to understand your product market fit. If you don't determine that and validate that before you get into the market will decide for you, and that can be quite brutal. It's a very fast moving market, so you've got to have a lot of conviction about what you're building. Secondly, you've got to listen to your users and have a really strong relationship with your community, your team, your ecosystem, which we really pride ourselves on doing. We take a lot of time to listen to the community and take their feedback. And thirdly, that your narrative is extremely important and your brand positioning and understanding where you need and want to play in the market as well, and positioning your brand and your project in that way.
I think that was a fantastic answer. And you've covered a lot of kind of my second question. But just to get a little bit maybe more clarity, because one of the things I've noticed since I've been in the industry
Yeah.
with various different chains. And it's kind of the chicken and the egg. You have to build and develop. So there's these communities of developers and there's these communities of we want to call degens, that are in there and they're playing and they're navigating. Um, but for the everyday user, for real world adoption,
Mhm.
they're in a completely different playing field. I remember this one conversation that I had with this guy. I'm not going to say the name of the chain, but if anybody's been following my journey, I actually used to be I was their first head ambassador. I think that was back in like 2021. Loved the tech. I thought it would like I loved what they were doing, but it was so hard for me to use. I even had to have
Mhm.
this developer come over to show me. I basically had some money like locked up um, in this kind of like smart contract. And even with him being a developer, it took us like 2 hours to do. And I was like, okay, well now I can see why real world adoption is not going to happen until we make it easier for people. And before I go into the question, I use this analogy lately with AI agents. Everyone's talking about, oh,
Mhm.
AI agents, this, da, 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 all these videos, they make it
Yeah.
seem like it's so easy. Has anyone gone onto N8 and actually seen like how technical and it is to create these AI agents? So I said to my friend, I was like, I think of like AI agents at the moment where they're at. It's like before WordPress. And then WordPress came along. It was a little bit easier. You had these plugins, right? But now there's Wix. I can create a website. Oh, there's, fast forward. Now we've got vibe coding. You know what I mean? Like you can
Mhm.
have a website up in a minute. So I think that we still have a long ways to go. But my question is, it really seems that community is at the heart and core part of Nexa's identity, and that you guys are really passionate about that. But how are you kind of designing for community and not just technology? How are you going to support the everyday users into coming into the ecosystem that aren't developers and they just want to learn how they can engage and interact with the projects that are being built on Nexa?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the, I would say, focuses for our BON program. So last year, we launched what's called BON, which stands for Build on Nexa. And BON initially is right now just a repository of all of the different SDKs and libraries, guides, and tools available for people who want to build on Nexa, of course. But in the long run, and what we're actually working with Evolve Her for this year is building out a learning track. And that learning track is actually going to have two core tracks. within it. One is going to be the basics and the fundamentals of Nexa as a network, which will really aim to support people wanting to generally learn about proof of work and now UTXO architecture and what is Nexa and how does Nexa, plan to play in the long run in the industry and beyond, and what's our vision, and really just learning about our mission and the fundamentals. And the second track will be the BON track, which is for developers and more technical participants in our ecosystem. And this was a really important next step for us with BON, was to build out this learning track, because we understand that it's really important for adoption that people, one, have access to resources and education so that they can learn. But two, we really wanted to create a way for people to participate and learn in an environment and with a platform that allows them to feel really engaged with what we're doing as well. And when we look at structuring the funnel, for example, for our ecosystem specifically, I see this learning track as a really core fundamental part to the middle of our funnel. When you talk about funnels, we're talking about top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. And the top part of that funnel is really about awareness and capturing people's attention and connecting with them on exactly what they care about as users and as developers looking for a network to build on. And then in the middle of the funnel, we need to engage them. And that's really where this learning track comes into play. And it's a big focus for me with my role this year with Nexa, is to get that learning track off the ground and make sure that we're equipping people and setting them up for success in our ecosystem and in our community. So yeah, there are real operational steps that need to be taken to real world adoption. And this is where I was talking before about when we saw the last NFT bull run in 2022. A lot of projects at that time didn't have a lot of substance and sort of popped up out of nowhere, and especially with without a lot of fundamentals, and the team were maybe entirely new to the space. And I would say to people, when they're looking for a network to explore, they're looking for a community in this space, Bitcoin Unlimited's been here for a very long time, and the reputation definitely speaks for itself. And you need to look for projects that have that stamina and that experience in the industry, and are not moved by trends and narratives that really are quite fleeting but are developing for the long run. And so again, it just comes back to we develop very deliberately, and we're here for the long run. And the infrastructure that we're putting in, especially in place this year with our development roadmap, there's a lot of focus on decades, not just the next few months. And how do we just get through the next couple of weeks? And oh, AI is trending right now, or privacy is trending right now. Quick, let's go and do something for that. No, we're here for the long run. We think in decades, and we build that way as well with everything that we do. We're very focused on the long-term strategic vision.
I think that's amazing. And that kind of takes me into my next question is more kind of around supporting women. And one of the common questions that I get from everyone, but even kind of like specifically for women that are looking to kind of transition into this space, is it's like, where do I start? How do I start upskilling myself? And there's an abundance of information on the internet. I always say access to information is not the problem. It's about not knowing what you need to look at. Before AI, it was like the prompts that you put into Google will generate the videos that you come up or the articles that come up. It's the same with AI, the questions. And I went on this little, I was researching another chain actually, and I was working with AI, but only because I had the knowledge. I
Yeah.
was prompting AI and I was like, wait, that's not right. And then it was like, oh, I'm sorry, you're right, and but because I had that underlying knowledge, so I always say AI is like a productivity tool, it's not always right, but if you don't know to question it, then you might not get the results that you're looking for. But one of the other things that I'm really excited about this learning track is I think I always say to my students, you want to get a job into the Web3 ecosystem. It's not like your traditional go on to Seek, or that's just a very popular platform in Australia, where you go
Mhm.
on, they post a job, you apply, you go for interviews. It's very different. I say get into their Discords. You know,
Mhm.
I, I'm sure if there was somebody that did your developer learning track and we saw that they were committed, they turned up to every webinar, they did the learning track, they were active in your community, and you
Mhm.
guys were looking to hire someone, are you going to look at someone that doesn't know anything about Nexa and hasn't invested any time? Or they're going to say,
Yeah.
hey, I've already done the course. I've already joined the community. I've already done this. Like I understand. I'm just looking for an opportunity. So I always say to the people that are serious about transitioning into this ecosystem, you've got to do the time and learning and upskilling yourself. So that kind of takes me into my next question that is a little bit more women's focused, but it's very general. But we are both very, very passionate about supporting more women to come into the Web3 ecosystem, which was a very big focus of our partnership. And we actually have the mentorship program, which I didn't mention in the beginning, but Nexa is actually sponsoring two women to go through this sponsorship, the scholarship mentorship program to help support more women to kind of come into the Web3 ecosystem. So I'd like to understand, why was this initiative so important for Nexa to support not only the education component, because we're doing that, but supporting more women into the Web3 ecosystem?
Yeah, I think I would talk more broadly as well about technical participation for women in this aspect, because that links to why this was important for us when evaluating this particular sponsorship for the ecosystem. I think that whenever the topic comes up about women in crypto or women in Web3, and obviously this month, there's a lot of content right now and topic around International Women's Day, and it's important to have these conversations. But I do notice that, when I see panels or I see these discussions come up about women in crypto, that there's kind of this bated breath where I think a lot of projects and organizations feel it's a lot of work to try and make women feel included in crypto or empowered or safe in crypto. And that's an important step, is the awareness. But what I would say is that women don't need our hands held. We're very strong, we're very capable. And there's a lot of women that are extremely passionate and have a lot of really good core skills that they want to bring into crypto and Web3. And there's an incredible talent market out there as well, with women who are looking to break into tech. And yeah, we don't need our hands held. I think often what women need and what they want is just basic operational infrastructure and systems that are put in place which support the team in general, right? That's not just specific to women. Having that operational framework in place and systems that really create career succession pathways for people in an organization, and the way that governance is structured. These are all really fundamentally important aspects of any project. And so often what women need is what a team will need, or what any individual will need. And I will read some statistics, because I was looking into this in preparation for this question, because there is often this question, I guess I see this topic a lot, especially on Twitter, is why are there not more women in crypto and Web3? And I would say that, what we know is that 60% of women cite a lack of crypto knowledge as a barrier to entry. And financial literacy training increases crypto participation for women by up to 30%. It's not that women don't want to be here. Often it's an educational barrier, and often it's a community and culture barrier as well. It does, the same report, 60% of women report experiencing discrimination or discomfort in crypto spaces. So really, we need to be really committed to cultivating a culture in this industry that is inclusive, that is welcoming, and that is a really core value with us at Nexa as well, is making sure that women feel valued, they feel respected, but that everyone in our community feels valued and respected, and that the things that we're putting in place are really fundamental to our vision of making Nexa and crypto accessible to everyone, and that everyone has the opportunity to participate in our ecosystem and our community, and use the things things that Bitcoin Unlimited is currently developing as well for Nexa and all of the layers that are coming together for our ecosystem. So I do think it comes down to listening to the women who are already here in the industry, taking feedback, and just putting in place, like I said, that operational framework that supports not only women, but everyone in an ecosystem or a community or a team, right? And so, again, coming back to even that learning track that we're building out for our ecosystem, that is one of those pieces of operational infrastructure that is really important when we talk about increasing technical participation and empowering women to come into crypto and stay in crypto.
Sorry, I was muted. I think I second everything that you say. Um, and you touched on something that it's more about operational infrastructure because I've worked for quite a few over the years if we want to label it as crypto bro kind of like startups.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do yes, it's a male dominated industry, and I'll come to that second part. But it's a startup. And I remember this story very vividly. I was working for this private RTO. And this girl, she came from a very structured university. They had their systems, their processes. And so she was just
Mhm.
used to being in an environment where everything was mapped out. And we were a startup RTO. We're bringing on, so like every 3 or 4 weeks, we were pivoting because we're trying to
Mhm.
find, like you said, product market fit. And she couldn't handle it. It wasn't that she couldn't handle being a woman in the industry. She just couldn't handle that we're constantly pivoting, and that's just startup world in general. So anybody that's getting involved in the space, whether you're a male or a female, and you're joining a startup in an emerging technology space, you have to be comfortable with that. 1 week we're doing this, and next month we realized, hey, this isn't working. We're gonna pivot and we're gonna go this way. And yes, we have to create a whole new SOP for that. It's like, but I never see it as wasted because you always learn. But then the second part is that there is this crypto bro culture, and because it's not a mature ecosystem, like say some of these big corporate companies like Google's and Amazon, like let's be honest, when Amazon very first started, I'm sure they didn't have policies and procedures in place. So not only
Mhm.
are you navigating a startup environment, but you're also navigating a space that's male dominated, and they don't have policies and such in place. So you're kind of navigating two things at once. And then yes, the education component I think is super important. And that's what the mentorship program is all about, is I make it very, very clear for the women that I'm not going to teach you. I remember when I did the beta program, and one of the pieces of feedback that I got was like, oh, I really want to learn how to create a Web3 wallet. And I'm like, but that's not what this is about. Like, here's the content over here for you. This is for me to learn at your existing skill sets. What do you already have? Where could we potentially fit you into the ecosystem? And then where do we just, is it just basic crypto knowledge? Then we can
Yeah.
teach you that. Is
Yeah.
it identifying what your strengths are? Because a lot of the times people are in roles that aren't their strengths. Um,
Mhm.
People say to me all the time, they're like, "Oh, you're really good at marketing." I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself a marketer, but obviously it just is kind of one of my underlying strengths that I never really kind of acknowledged or thought of. So I think sometimes by diving deep, and that's one of the things that we go through in the mentorship program, is doing disc profiling, understanding your strengths, where are your weaknesses, how can we support you in that journey. So I think it's super, super important.
Yeah.
I think we covered that. So I'm just kind of reading through the questions. It's kind of like you're answering two questions at once, without
I
me
will
having.
add to that if that's okay. You mentioned
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
and I just wanted to touch on that because I think this is an important thing for anyone listening or who will listen to the replay. If you're a woman looking to get into crypto and you just don't know where to break in, and it can be overwhelming to do that. I remember when I started looking at the space seriously in late 2020 to 2021, and then, we're sort of coming through that DeFi summer narrative and that bull run and into the NFT bull run. And it can seem overwhelming. And I would just say that you bring the skills you already have with you. And I think there is this misconception often that when you come into crypto, there's so much to learn and there's so much to catch up on. There's often a technical gap, but there's also just many nuances in the industry that you've got to learn, right? It's a whole living, breathing ecosystem and organism of itself. And so it can feel overwhelming. But I would say that it's important to just get plugged in with communities and projects that align with your values. And if you come in and you say, okay, I'm really interested in, blockchains or networks that are focused on enterprise use cases, and maybe they're working directly, in gaming or provenance tracking or payment processing. And I know that my strengths are this, this, and this, or these are my qualifications. This is my expertise. And you just got to look for teams that have, really been here. Like I said, Bitcoin Unlimited's been here for quite a while now. They've had a lot of experience over the past decade in this industry. And so there's the core team, and then you've also got the vision for the project as well. And look for projects that are not, like I said, off with the fairies in some ways, not getting pulled into these fleeting narratives and 1 minute they're here and they're 100% switched on, and then the next week they completely disappear. You really need to look for stability. And I think that's important for women coming into crypto. And so, again, that comes back down simply to operational frameworks and infrastructure. And that's a really big focus for us this year with this learning track that's coming, where we're going to make it easy for anyone to come into our ecosystem and either learn the fundamentals about who we are and our vision and what we're here to do, or how to build with us and on our network.
Very well. That was kind of I had you triggered. That was going to be my closing question for this topic before we move on to the next one. Is that if you had a piece of advice
Mhm.
to anyone, but more specifically to women that are looking to kind of get into this space, what would you say to them? And at the start of this call, I said it's just about showing up. It's
Mhm.
just about being there. The amount of times I just know just a little bit about a project. I've watched one or two videos and then I meet somebody at a conference and they're like, "Oh, I work for this chain or I do this." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know too much about it, but from my understanding, da da da." And they're like, "Oh, wow." Like I was like, "Oh, I don't know much more than that." They're like, "You already know like 100% more than most people." So like
Yes.
we don't need to know. And the industry moves so fast
Yeah.
that you can't possibly be an expert at everything. And I think there's a statistic that like women, when they look at a job application, like we need to have like 90% of like the qualifications. And I think men will apply at like 60% or something of that nature. So I guess if you had one piece of advice to any women that are exploring getting into this, more specifically in the technical side of things, because I do see a lot of women that come to me that are interested, and I always say to them, if you're interested in the technical side of things, like that's where there's a lot more opportunities. Like a lot of the job roles that I see is projects looking for more technical roles. Yeah, what would be your advice to them to getting started?
Yeah, so if you're looking specifically for technical roles, definitely getting plugged into a community or a project that you care about is a good starting point. And the ecosystem and the community in that sense does become a pipeline of talent for organizations to look at as well. Definitely. I think that it becomes a succession pathway. I know for us, we have a really great team of moderators and we have a great team of like ambassadors for our community. And so that's the first place that we'll look for people who are really dedicated to Nexa and the mission and the vision of what we're building. People that have been here with us for a while now and have, either been building on our ecosystem or have just been an active participant. That goes for technical and non-technical people. And like I said, it's not a matter of you've got to come into the space and know everything all at once. It's just the attitude of coming in and wanting to learn and really dedicating yourself to the project or dedicating yourself to the cause that you find and that you believe in and that aligns with your values and where you want to go with your career as well in the future. And so, whether it's a bull or a bear market, I think it's important to just stay plugged in and keep joining calls exactly like this one. You never know who you're going to meet. And being a part of, the community is a really important first step. And for us, as well with Nexa and with our community, we have, moderators and our community manager who every day are updating people on what's being built and what's happening and always there to answer questions. And that's really important. I know that there's a lot of projects that don't prioritize that type of communication. And so for us, it's really important that we are, openly communicating with our community. And like I mentioned earlier, that's one of the core pillars of building a community, a lasting community in this space, is that communication and that connection with your community. So yeah, I
Yeah.
would say just stay plugged in, stay vigilant, keep your finger on the pulse, and gravitate towards whatever aligns with your values and where you want to be in your career and who can you learn from. And I think that's another important thing why this learning track will be so important because it will, as people come in and they do that learning track and they complete the modules and they learn, oh, that's why Nexa does this specific way, or that's why they made this decision when creating the network and putting in these specific features, or that's why they're developing this particular, use case or app. You'll understand how it fits in with, your values and where you want to go. And that's the best way to find people that are truly aligned.
Yeah, I think there's two things that came to my head as a story. One time I was being interviewed, this is probably like 20 years ago, probably showing my age, nothing to do with the crypto space. But I remember they asked me in the interview, like, why do you want to work for this company? And obviously I had done my homework and understanding why that what was it that attracted me to that company. I didn't give them a cookie cutter answer. I got the job, by the way. And then another second story, it was about 3 years ago, and I was moderating this panel at the back then it was Blockchain Australia for DECA, and I was in this room. I felt super intimidated, like full of
Mhm.
C-suites and enterprise, and I got thrown into this panel because this woman pulled out last minute, and I got up there. And I had so many people come up to me afterwards because I just had a real conversation. Like I wasn't using the fancy enterprise chat or whatnot. Anyways, long story short is this guy came up to me afterwards and I said to him, that was the best panel. And, I want to learn more about what you're doing. And then I said, how did you end up here? And then he mentioned the chain that he was a part of. He goes, "Oh, I'm just like in their Discord in their
Mhm.
group and I've been following them." And I said, "Oh, let me introduce you to," and it was the person that was the representative there. And then because they didn't know who he was, but they just recognized his handle and that he was active in the community. And then I think he actually ended up going and getting like a moderator role or like an ambassador role. And I always say to my students, sometimes I volunteered and I still volunteer, but in the beginning, it's like, okay, you want to break into the industry? Best way to do it is put your hand up and do 5 or 10 hours of moderating or like community
Mhm.
support. Show that project that you're actually genuinely interested in their project, you believe in their mission, and you're showing up and you're not just looking for a job. Because whether
Yeah.
it's the traditional interview or whether it's the Web3 space, people can really truly tell if you're actually passionate. And so you don't necessarily need to have a lot of knowledge. You just have to have, in terms of to get started, of course, you have to be willing to upskill yourself, but just show up, show that you're passionate and that you're eager to learn.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into some of the more kind of meat and potatoes of Nexa. So, infrastructure decisions often shape who can participate in the network. How does Nexa
Mhm.
think about inclusion when it's designing its architecture, not only from a developer sense, but in terms of the UX and the users participating?
Yeah, I can speak to it from, I think, what we did with BON last year as well. So our Build on Nexa program. Um, when you are putting in place infrastructure, or you're building something like an application or a project, it's really important to like I said, establish that product market fit and identify who your ICP is, your integrated customer profile, before you bring something to the market. And with BON, especially last year, I worked really closely with a number of our developers and speaking to our community, our existing ecosystem developers within the community, to really understand what they needed, what were the gaps. And I think that's a really important first step when you're building infrastructure and you're thinking about how do we make this as accessible and as inclusive for people as possible. You've got to listen to the people that will use it, right? You've got to understand what their friction points are and what do they need. And one of the common pieces of feedback that we did, and I ran, some surveys and I really spoke to, like I said, a number of our community members and our moderators and our ecosystem developers. One of the common pieces of feedback that came back was we really want options. We need various SDKs and programming languages and guides and tutorials and basically as many resources as we can. That comes down to up-to-date documentation and tools. Like we have a tool called the NextScript Playground. So if you're building a smart contract on Nexa with our scripting language NextScript, you can go and use our playground to compile and test that contract in a live playground environment, and that it will show you line by line what errors there might be, and that helps you to really validate the contract to make sure it's working. So we put a lot of focus as a team last year when we were designing the Build on Nexa program, that we needed to have tools, libraries, SDKs that catered not just to any one specific audience, but more broadly. And so obviously within BON, we have TypeScript and JavaScript libraries, we have Kotlin, we have Python coming this year. So again, that just is reaching broader audiences and people that use those programming languages. And I think it's important as well that you've got to understand, especially with developers, they're not going to change the language that they use just to build on your network. They look for accessibility, they look for ease when they're looking to build on something. So that's where it's important to have options for people so that they can use what they need, because they're going to they're going to build based on their existing skills and what they know. And then you might open them up to other opportunities once they come in and they see other ways of doing things, or they see examples, and it expands their knowledge base from there. And I think that's the best thing that you can do for someone, is bring them in, meet them where they're at, and show them how they can expand. So in a way, there is that succession pathway sort of intuitively put into BON, that we want people to come in based on where they're at, and then see other options and see other ways of doing things they may not have thought of, and making sure that the tools and the guides and the resources that we put in place are for everyone to use, and that they're easy to understand, and that we remove some of that friction around how to get started on Nexa, and making it easier to sort of get plugged into. So from that perspective, I think that's how you really think of being inclusive with infrastructure decisions. And that's another reason it keeps coming back to why we're doing that learning track, because that's another very important decision of how do we make people feel that this is an easy place to build and belong to, and what knowledge gaps do we need to help them fill so that they feel confident to belong to our ecosystem and to stay here.
So I'm going to throw a question at you that is not in our
Go for
prep
it.
questions, but a lot of chains offer different types of grant programs, or they're trying to attract people like, hey, come on, build. And I've heard
Mhm.
countless where a project started building on one chain, and then a chain's given them a grant so that they've moved because they're EVM compatible. So it's a two-part kind of question. Is one, does Nexa have that type of program? And if so, where could anybody that is on this call or watching the recording find information about that kind of support? Um, and then the second thing is hackathons. I've noticed that a lot of the times it's kind of like, how do we have these hackathons? They're usually around kind of big conferences, or they have big amounts of prizes. And I know that it's kind of a two-part thing. Is one is trying to get people to learn how to build on these projects, but then I also know that a lot of projects or development firms use these hackathons to try to
Mhm.
identify and find talent. So kind of,
Yes.
yeah, both two and one to summarize. Do you guys have a grant program if there's a project that's like, hey, I've gone and done my research on Nexa and I'd love to learn. But hey, I've already spent all this time and money to develop on this chain.
Mhm.
I need the capital to be able to move over. And then also hackathons. Do you guys do anything of that to kind of support developers?
Yeah, so I can answer both in one go because it's both directly tied to each other. So, um, speaking about hackathons specifically, what you really want to consider with a hackathon is that we've seen this a lot with other ecosystems that run major hackathons with a lot of prize money allocated and all kinds of incentives. Often, what happens is people will join the hackathon and then they'll leave the ecosystem after the hackathon is over. And for us, it's really important that the people who join a hackathon that we run or come to build on Nexa, stay with Nexa. We want them to feel that they can be here for the long run with us and build for the future with us alongside us. And so we are going to be running a hackathon. We're not putting a date on it yet. However, I will say that the learning track that we're doing with Evolve Her this year for the ecosystem is a direct pathway to being able to participate in the hackathon that we do run likely in 2027. And so, what that does for us is it allows us to build the pipeline for the hackathon and build a community that is really embedded already with our ecosystem. So by the time the hackathon comes, it's a very natural progression into participating into that. And we've kind of validated and pre-qualified people who would be perfect for the hackathon. And we're going to be quite strategic about the vertical or the use case that the hackathon is based on, so that there is real value in it, not just for our ecosystem, but also in positioning Nexa in, enterprise and institutional finance in the long run as well. So with the grant program, we don't have one yet, but definitely we're exploring that as we also build towards a hackathon. Hackathons take a lot of planning and like I said, it's really important to us that people feel they can stay in our ecosystem even after the event has ended, because we've seen a lot of that over the years. You see around TGE launches, there's a lot of airdrop campaigns and incentive campaigns, and then people will join to get the incentive and then they don't stick around. And
Yeah.
while it's, that's one way of marketing and bringing people in, we want people here with us for the long term. And it does just come back to, I'd say that's one of our core values at Bitcoin Unlimited as an organization, is that we don't want to be hype driven. We're really tech and future driven. And so we do definitely have that longer term framing in mind with whatever we do. And that definitely applies to the hackathon as well. So I would say to anyone wondering, it's coming. And the best way that you can support us and be part of that journey is when we release the Learn track is to participate. You do get a certificate as well. Maybe you can speak to that, Danielle, and just be plugged in with our ecosystem, because everything we do this year is geared towards setting up for that.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few things that I've seen a common narrative with projects that we call them vanity metrics, that are like, we have X amount of users, but they're just
Yeah,
farmers. So one of our other scholarship sponsors, Centrix, I've actually developed a tool. It's like an audit tool. So think of like a smart contract audit, but they're actually auditing their user base to remove all of the one guy with like 100 wallets that's just farming your tokens and then drains the
yeah.
liquidity. And then
Wow.
I think that you touched on something, and we won't dive into it, but I think that with these hackathons, like you said, okay, they get the prize money and they go. Well, I remember when I was working on a particular project, and it was on another chain, but they had these certain milestones, and then the funds only got released, it was in a smart contract when they hit those milestones. So I think hackathons need to maybe be redesigned where it's like, okay, this is the total prize, but you only get let's just say it's $100,000. Okay, you get $25,000 for every milestone. So it's not like, oh, hey, we've got the
Mm.
money and we're just going to go to the next chain that's going to offer us money to move. Because I've
Hmm.
seen it where there's just projects that are struggling because liquidity and
Yeah.
VC money is hard to get. So
Yeah.
they're literally just bouncing around from chain to chain that will offer them money. And then they'll just be like, oh, okay, well, I've done that hackathon, I've done that grant program. I'm going to go over here now. So
Yeah.
I do think that it's important for projects to be looking for the longer term gain. And that kind of saying it seems like the common culture that you have at Nexa is it's not about what's it? It's about quality over quantity. It's about who are the
Yeah.
people that are actually here that are going to build long term and
Yeah.
not rushing to launch something. So I think that that's really important because I think that we are in the middle, and I always say to people that are new to the space, I literally feel like not only are we in a traditional financial ecosystem transition and don't even talk about AI, but I also think that we're in a transition within the Web3
Mhm.
ecosystem of like all of the projects that are just vanity metrics and these fancy
Yeah.
websites and roadmaps that actually don't have the tech underneath them. But
Hmm.
people don't know how to do their research and go and learn and understand. Okay, well, who's Bitcoin Unlimited? Who's the company that
Yeah.
is attached? Like, uh, I remember when I got into this space, people would be like, do your own research. I don't know how to do my own research. More important,
Yeah.
it says,
How?
go find an undervalued company and invest in it. I'm like, how do I even know if a company is
Yeah.
undervalued?
Yeah.
So with AI, I was able to drop their white paper in it. I was able to come up with a whole bunch of questions. And then I went to the CTO. I felt really smart. And I was just like, okay, well, this company owns this. And so it's like Nexa is built by Unlimited Education. Okay, great. Who's Unlimited Edu sorry, that's my own company.
Bitcoin unlimited.
Bitcoin no, my actual company is
Mhm.
called Unlimited Education. So Bitcoin Unlimited. That's the Evolver is the business, the company.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Bitcoin Unlimited. Okay, great. Who's in behind it? And people
Yeah.
don't generally go that far, right? They just see
Hmm.
Nexa. They don't actually take the time to go and understand who's in behind the company, who's
Yeah.
actually building it, how long have they been here, and what's their kind of true core values. So I think
Hmm.
that's good. All right. So we are getting towards the end of time. So for anybody that is on the call, please, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat. I know that we're going to talk a lot more about Nexus architecture in next month's educational webinar with Andrew, who's the president of Bitcoin Unlimited. But can you just give us a bit of a high level that, we know that UTXO architecture is kind of the core of Nexa's DNA. Can you share a specific example on how that gives Nexa the advantage in real world use cases that account
Yeah.
chains struggle with?
Yeah, absolutely. You've touched on it immediately, and I'll start there. So, Nexa is a UTXO layer one proof of work blockchain, just like Bitcoin. We have a very similar architecture to Bitcoin and the same tokenomics as well. The difference with Nexa is there are a lot of inbuilt features in our network that allow us to scale much more than Bitcoin can. And you do hear this as well coming up a lot more at the moment that Bitcoin will face scaling issues. And Nexa is primed for token scalability and global scalability with our use cases as a network. UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. And the UTXO model processes transactions in parallel. The accounting model of processing transactions is what Ethereum, for example, uses. And historically, what we've seen with networks like Solana as well and Ethereum is that there are a lot of gas fees and scaling bottlenecks as well as the network scales, network outages, and things like that. So Nexa is really our core value proposition for that, for any use case, is scalability and stability in that sense as well. Our ability to process transactions in parallel really makes us suitable for use cases that need to scale rapidly, and this is suitable for things like micropayment, subscription services, point of sale, in-game token economies, provenance tracking and supply chain. So there's a number of use cases in the world that require that type of scalability and versatility in a network. And so that's really Nexa's strength. And the UTXO architecture, we're really pushing that to the limit. It's actually in our white paper as well, which is available on our website if you go to nexa.org. And I believe it's /white paper, but just go to nexa.org and have a look. You know, again, Bitcoin Unlimited has been here for a long time now in the industry, and they've been spearheading a lot of really big innovations as far as technology goes, even right down to FPGA hardware scaling, which is a really big piece of our roadmap this year. And I'd encourage listeners to go and look at that development roadmap on our X feed and on our forum as well through our website. But yeah, we're definitely pushing the limits on scaling and really pushing Satoshi's original vision for Bitcoin forward in a very dramatic manner. When you look at the original Bitcoin white paper, Satoshi outlined, a framework for Bitcoin to become a very scalable electronic peer-to-peer cash network. And over the years, when you look back towards like 2016, 2017, right through to even 2020, historically we had what's called like the block size war debates, and Bitcoin Unlimited was really championing for scaling and raising the block size limit. And Nexa is a result of that vision to create a network that can handle global usage. And so, yeah, it's a big part of our vision and our core mission. The UTXO architecture is really a fundamental piece to all of that. And this is more of the type of content that you'll learn as well in our learning track about that UTXO architecture. And of course, Andrew Clifford in our next webinar with you, Danielle, next month is going to cover how we're rethinking proof of work and what we're doing differently, and what makes Nexa a suitable network for those types of use cases that really we're now starting to see come to fruition in the market, and we're seeing more demand for as well. So I'm very excited to hear more about that in next month's webinar along with everyone else. And it's always great to see the things that are coming out of our development team. We have some of the brightest thinkers and innovators in the world on our team, and it's really great to be a part of that.
I think that's amazing. I remember when I got into to Bitcoin and I was sold, all of this, oh, faster transactions, cheaper, all of this. And then I remember the very first time I like tested it out and I transferred $100 worth of Bitcoin from my cold storage wallet and it cost me $13. I'm like, that's not cheaper.
Yeah.
And it wasn't faster. And then I started going down the rabbit hole, but it was very confusing time because there was Bitcoin Cash and then Bitcoin SV and all these hard
Mhm.
forks. And, as a newcomer, it was really quite confusing. And I think since then, I think that the narrative is that people understand that Bitcoin has become this, digital gold, because it is the most secure network. If I'm sending multi-million dollar transactions, I definitely want to be using the most secure network, aka
Yeah.
Bitcoin. I'm not going to say the name of this particular chain, but there's been multiple times where that chain has gone offline, and
Mm.
and because I only had one client node, and before, I didn't even understand what a client node was. And for anybody that's
Yeah.
listening on this conversation, that's okay if you don't understand. It took me a long time. I come from a non-technical background. But now, after years of just being here and showing up and learning to different conversations, okay, I understand why Bitcoin is the most secure network, but I also understand that it's not practical for me to go and pay for a cup of coffee at my local
Mhm.
shop with it because it's not fastable, it's not scalable, it's too expensive. So I'm really excited to jump in and dive in and understand the architecture and how
Yeah.
Nexa is taking the blockchain trilemma of, security and scalability,
Yeah.
and kind of taking that technology and restructuring it. Because I always say to new people that are coming into the industry, it's kind of like think of the dot-com boom, and then we ended up with, your Googles and your Amazons and everyone that kind of like, cracked the code, not necessarily just on technical, but from the community aspect and product market
Hmm.
fit and all of those. I feel that we're kind of at the early stages of these different chains. And you may have really good marketing, but it's not going to last if you actually don't have good technology, if your chain's going down
Yeah.
all the time, if it's centralized. So I think that it's
Yeah.
just a matter of, once again, education and people fully understanding it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Couple more questions. If anybody has any questions, please pop them into the chat. So, what use cases or applications being built on Nexa right now do you think perfectly represent where the ecosystem is heading?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I mentioned before the FPGA hardware accelerator chip, which is called Blitz, and that's a big part of our development roadmap for this year as well. This has been developed by Dr. Peter Risen, and he's incredible. And we've got a team as well, Seni, who's working on that alongside him. There's a whole team on this project, and basically with this. Hardware accelerator chip, we're addressing the slowest component in blockchain architecture and accelerating it. And this is really a game changer for blockchain in its next chapter of adoption, I believe. And this really does position Nexa at the forefront as an innovator. And again, this comes back to Bitcoin Unlimited's reputation as legacy innovators. And so that's probably one of the big ones that I would say is really representative of where we're going as a network and our vision for pushing the limits of scalability so that we can really position Nexa in a way that it can be used by those enterprise and institutional type use cases. And also in that development roadmap released, you'll see mention of other projects on the release schedule for this year, like Tokadex, for example. And there's also a Nexa card game coming as well, which really will be a fantastic demonstration for people to understand how Nexa works in a gaming scenario. So there are a number of applications coming and projects coming this year that I think are going to really set Nexa apart. We also have our first halving coming up next month as well, which is a milestone for us because we do follow that same 4-year cycle that Bitcoin does. So, it's a big year for us and there's a lot happening. And I would just recommend that, again, if you care about enterprise use cases and you care about how crypto or blockchain is going to disrupt and be part of that in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I would definitely encourage you to look at Nexa. Oh, you're muted.
Right. A lot of those things that you uncover, and for those that are listening or watching the recording, if you don't know what a halving is or you don't know what a hard fork is, that's all the things that we're going to be talking
Yeah.
about in the next webinar. So stay tuned. And for anybody that is listening, what I used to do when I would go to these types of talks, and I would just write down words like what's a halving, what's a hard fork, and then I just go and watch a YouTube video on it, and
Yeah.
that's how I learned. So don't feel too overwhelmed if you're like, I don't understand half of what they're saying right now.
Mhm.
But I think that it's very important for people to understand tokenomics. What is a halving? What is a hard fork? What is the purpose of it? Because if you
Yeah.
don't understand the purpose and the reason, then that is the longevity of what is going to be that's going to sustain these different chains that are apart from other chains. Um,
Yeah.
all right, to wrap it out, um, for the community members that are listening, whether they're developers, enthusiasts, potential contributors, what are the highest impact ways that they can get involved now?
Right now, join us in our community channels. I mentioned earlier we have a really dedicated team of moderators, and I can see Don in this call as well. Don, he works across marketing with Nexa, and he's in the chats every day. We have a really dedicated team that are there, committed to answering questions and fielding feedback. And so I would recommend that if you're interested in Nexa and you're interested in what we're building, start with our community channels. You can also find us on X as well at Nexa Money and really get to learn a little bit more about our mission and also Bitcoin Unlimited on our website, nexa.org. And there we'll be announcing any upcoming releases as well. And that will include when we do eventually release the learning track as well, which is slated for later this year. So yeah, get plugged in. We do have Discord too. You can find all of the links to all of our social platforms on our website.
Yeah, perfect. I always say to people, getting started, first of all, if you don't understand money, then you're not going to understand the value of Bitcoin. So
Mhm.
if you don't take the time to really understand the value of blockchain, the value of Bitcoin, then you're going to have a hard time understanding the value that Nexa is bringing to the ecosystem. So for anybody that's listening to call, that's my 2 cents is definitely stay plugged in. We've got lots of learning tracks and opportunities
Mhm.
coming for you later this year. But for right now, in the meantime, if you don't understand why Bitcoin and what problem that it was solving, in creating this peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which it has done, but
Mhm.
there are scalability issues, which is one of the things that the Nexa architecture is solving. But
Yeah.
before you can fully appreciate that, you need to understand the role of Ethereum. And I know that we didn't even really talk about Ethereum. I remember when I was doing a little bit of my research, and this might not be the right analogy, but you know me, when I teach, I try to use kind of really, really simple analogies. It's kind of like if Bitcoin and
Mhm.
Ethereum, almost had a baby. You've kind of got the attributes of the smart contracts and everything that Ethereum has, but then you have
Yeah.
the security of Bitcoin. Is that a good analogy or am I off the mark on that one?
No, no, I would say that, yeah, definitely. I was actually just looking on our website because I'm thinking that for people that want to learn more about Nexa, you could definitely start by watching Andrew Clifford's speech from Blockchain Futurist Conference last year as well in Toronto. And it's titled 10,000 Exchange Traded Cryptos, Why Nexa? It's a fantastic talk that I would recommend everyone listen to as well, which really does cover the choices that were made when architecting Nexa and what went into mapping out Nexa as a project and as a network. And I think coming back to Bitcoin for a second, we have seen this narrative pop up that Bitcoin's fantastic as digital gold, but if you actually read the white paper, it wasn't supposed to be digital gold. It was supposed to be utilized. And in Satoshi's early emails and communications, he really did talk about um, Bitcoin comparing to Visa, the Visa network. And if you look at how many transactions the Visa network is processing, there's a lot of transactions. But Bitcoin is not able to scale to that. The block size limit definitely, like I said, there was a whole debate around that in the late 2010s, and it's definitely been a core part of the mission and the road that's led Bitcoin Unlimited to developing Nexa. And Bitcoin Unlimited did work on BCH as well, Bitcoin Cash, which I think, some people might be familiar with. And now they're really dedicated on Nexa. And so it is important to understand the context and the history of what led us here. And when you do understand that context and the story of Bitcoin Unlimited and their commitment to scaling and what's led to creating Nexa, it does put it into perspective, and it's important perspective to have. So yeah, I would encourage people to get on our website and listen to that speech as well that Andrew Clifford, he gave wonderfully last year in Toronto. And there's also on our YouTube channel a bunch of videos from our lead developer, Andrew Stone, as well, and other team members, where we talk about in various different ways, covering different aspects of our mission.
Perfect. Well, I really enjoyed that, and I can't wait to dive deeper into more of the educational component in our next webinar. And I
Mhm.
know we're in the middle of developing out the learning track. So, everybody that knows me, I'm super passionate about education. So, I'm very, very grateful that Nexa, I have a lot of projects and this narrative of how important education is and how important it is to support more women into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
But not a lot of chains actually taking the time to support initiatives such as all things blockchain and evolve her, which I consider more of these kind of like social impact projects because
Yeah.
they don't see a lot of them are more geared towards how do we get more degen users? But the reality is that these users are just one guy and 100 wallets that are draining your liquidity. So when
Yeah.
your
You need real
project's
users.
gonna yeah, so you might see instant gratification, but the thing is if we don't, what's that saying? You can teach a man to, what? Well, no, what's it? You can give him, what's the saying? You can.
I think I know what you're trying to say, but I couldn't word it any better, so
Well,
I
they say you
don't
can
know.
lead a horse to water, but you can drink it.
Yeah, you can't make
You
a
can
drink.
give. I can't remember the exact saying, but you can give somebody, money to go and buy food, or you could actually teach him to fish.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the analogy. I know it's been a
Yeah.
day for me, so that analogy didn't come out very well.
No, I got what you're trying to say.
But yes, so I really appreciate projects like Nexa that are seeing that it might not be a quick fix or pump and dump in terms of education and taking the time to actually build out a community organically and genuinely. It takes more time, so there's not that instant gratification.
Hmm.
But it's the projects that are going to be here, in my opinion, years to come that are
Yes.
investing in that infrastructure to provide those learning resources. Because a lot of the times when I research a project and I type it into Google,
Mhm.
it's just influencers talking about a project,
Yeah. And
right?
that's important. And I will add to that just quickly. You just prompted me. There was a CoinGecko report released recently that said 11 million crypto projects failed last year alone in 2025. It's a lot of failed projects. And, we do really try to instill this type of confidence with our community that the market was tough last year, but we're still here, we're still building, we're completely committed to the mission. And that's important. That's why it's important to do your own research and look at the team behind a project and the white paper and what is their track record and what have they worked on over the last few years or the last decade in our example, in our case. So, yeah, I would say that's important context that the crypto market is still in its infancy in many ways. I'd say maybe coming into its adolescence. And it is in a maturation phase, and we are seeing a bit of a consolidation happen in the market with projects. And that's why it's important to look for teams that are here building for longevity, like Bitcoin Unlimited.
I just remembered the saying, you can give a man a fish and he eats for a day. You can teach him how to fish and then he can
Yeah,
for forever.
he'll eat for a lifetime. Yeah, exactly
Exactly.
right.
So, well, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I hope that all of the listeners that are on the live call and the recording got some value and a bit of
Yeah.
context to what's Nexa's mission and what you have in store and developing for the community. Really, really looking forward to developing these learning tracks and helping more people learn not only how they can get active in terms of a user, but also if they're interested in upskilling themselves and going down that developer learning track, or if they're already a developer, how they can get started. So once
Yeah.
again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody that joined us, and
Thank you.
we will
It's
see
been
you next
lovely
month.
chatting to you, Danielle. I appreciate how much you champion community growth and women being in crypto and just supporting what we're doing with Nexa. It's great. And today was more of a relaxed chat just for people to sort of hear a bit about our mission and what we're doing and who we are. And, next month, definitely please join when Andrew Clifford speaks a bit more to how we're rethinking proof of work.
Yes, and if you can't make the call next or the webinar next month, not a problem. We share all of the recordings in the Education Hub. So if you haven't signed up already, go and do that because all of the recordings are in there for you. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month.